Hi everyone, and welcome to this week's video on religious trauma. With this week's video, I wanted to answer a couple of questions simultaneously because I've had some of you email me or leave comments asking how to find people that are good or how to get over feeling like men or authority or women or whoever it is are the enemy. And I want to talk a little bit on how the brain develops because I think understanding how the brain develops, it was key for me in my healing. And I just want to come on here and offer the story of how I started finding evidence in the other direction. Because when you're raised in something really traumatic, your brain is set up to make connections. So you start connecting things as you're growing up in this traumatic environment. But the connections that you make is that everything is bad. So like your parents are bad, your God is really like God hates you. People like are mean to you at church or people are mean to you in school, and everything starts to become a danger signal if you grew up in a religiously abusive environment. Your brain starts to make these connections, and the webbing of your world is that you are constantly in danger, and all the connections that you make are actually can send your mind a danger signal. So you can end up feeling really anxious or really, quote, shy, or with a personality type that is very timid. And I think it's important to know that that's normal, especially if you grew up in an environment that didn't encourage personal growth. It didn't encourage the development of your brain, because if your brain develops properly, then you start to be curious and ask questions. And if there's a religious abusive religion involved, they don't want that for you. They do not want you to have a healthy brain, because then you'll ask questions. So if you grew up in this environment where your brain development wasn't encouraged, then that means the whole thing is kind of spastic and it's a little bit of a mess in there. But the good news is that you can always go in and rehaul. But my main point is that if you're in this place where you feel really confused and you're not quite sure what step to take forward, and you kind of feel lost sometimes in your brain, or it's a scary place to be in your brain, know that if you have never built your brain before, then it is normal to feel confused and not know where to go. That's a very normal thing. If you grew up in an environment that didn't encourage proper development of your brain might be a scary place to live. And what you need to do is look for evidence in the other direction. You need to allow new evidence into your brain so your brain can start to make different connections. And for me, the moment in my life that I first made a new connection, and I literally felt it in my brain, was I was in yoga class, which I was not supposed to be in. But in any case, I was in yoga class and the teacher was teaching, and I knew that I was incapable of everything. And she was telling me to do crow pose, which was something that I had attempted at home a couple of times and it had never worked. And so I went into the pose knowing that it wouldn't work, knowing that I'm incapable, and I was just trying to do it because the teacher said to do it, and I didn't want to upset her because then she would be mad at me, and it was that whole spiral. So I attempted it, and for some reason it worked. And I remember holding it and then coming down, being really confused, and then trying it again, and it worked again. And then I just ended up crying on my mat because my brain fired a thought off that said, oh my God, you can do it. And I had never had that thought before. I had never felt capable in my life. And I felt like a new groove go through my brain. And then I cried for a number of reasons, one of which was that I didn't know I was capable. I didn't know I could learn new things. And also now I had been proud of myself, so now I needed to be punished. So it was all of that. But what I started doing was going back to class and trying to do harder and harder things, because I had at least one little shred of evidence. I had one moment that showed me that I was capable. And so I started coming back and being like, can I find other things that I'm capable of? Can I recreate that moment of capability again? And I started getting better and better because I was willing to try. I was willing to try really hard. And so as I started doing that, then I started getting this body of evidence that, oh my God, I'm capable. And that led me down a whole path. Now I get to be this person. But it starts with that one moment of being willing to look for new evidence, being willing to try something new, to gather evidence in the other direction So for any of you who have reached out and asked, how do I, feel safe around women, or how do I feel safe around men, or how can I trust that this person is not going to abuse me, because everyone is an abuser. It's important for you to separate that and to understand that in your past, everyone you knew might have been mentally ill and might have been an abuser. But now, at this new chapter in your life, you are free to go gather evidence in the other direction. So it does require a lot of courage, and it does require trying on your part, because you do have to go out and look for the evidence because you don't have it. I had no evidence that I was capable. Even though I had accomplished things, I was not able to view them as my accomplishments, because those accomplishments belong to God. But I started gathering evidence slowly but surely for myself, and my willingness to look for evidence in the other direction and have the courage to try is what saved me and continues to save me over and over again. So, wherever you are, and whatever world that you want to live in, it is possible to live in the world that you envision. If you can think of a world where you feel safe and you feel loved and you feel happy, that world does exist, but you have to go search for evidence for it. It will not come to you. Your brain needs to actively attempt something. Otherwise, it's just passive information, and it'll bounce off of the walls that you built, because your brain has already made connections. Your brain has already made the connections that it needed to in order for you to survive. And now that you can survive, now you have to decide to let new information into your brain. So I highly, highly encourage you to go searching for evidence in the direction that that you want to go, and in the direction of the things that you want to believe. So if you want to believe that men are good and not harmful, then you have to be willing to look for evidence for that. And if you're not willing to look for evidence, then they're not good. And you're never going to find evidence for that. And you're right, and you get to be right for the rest of your life. But it starts with finding out who you want to be, or kind of envisioning the world that you want to be in. And then the next step is having the courage to actively look for evidence in the other direction. So that is my story today. That's the thing that I encourage you to do. And a lot of these things, I understand, can sound very vague, but healing is not something that I can prescribe. Healing is something that I went looking for evidence for my own healing, and I found it. And for a fact, if you go looking for evidence of your own healing, you will find it. But it's not something that healing is not linear. It's something that is different for everybody, but there is a really beautiful path of healing ahead of you, especially if you are here. That means you're actively looking. Like, you ended up here, you found a community of people who are speaking about or speaking on or healing from religious trauma. And before you looked for that evidence, it's not that this didn't exist, it's that you just didn't see it. And your brain is already connected, and it's not that safety for you or good people for you don't exist. It's that you don't see it, and that's okay. But go looking for evidence for it, and I guarantee you, you will find evidence for the thing that you need to find. So that is my video today. I hope that it was helpful. Thank you for being here and for listening and for actively looking for evidence. And I encourage you to have the courage to believe that there is a different way of life that is open and possible for you, and then go find evidence for it. So I hope that this was helpful, and I'll see y'all next time.